Okay, so hi everyone, welcome to our show. I'm your host Sudeshna, and today we are in conversation with Poornima Nair, who joins us from Chennai. Poornima is Poojita's sister. So last episode we spoke with Poojita, who has been dealing with bipolar, borderline, and ADHD for a long time. So today let's chat with Poornima and let's know more about from a caregiver's perspective. So thanks a lot for joining, Poornima.
Hi, Sudeshna. Thank you so much for having me. Tell me.
Yeah. So, Poornima, can you please tell us like what was your first emotional response to the situation?
So, I think I was around first year college, which is close to almost 10 years back, when we got to know that she was diagnosed with bipolar personality disorder. My first emotional response was definitely denial because it didn't really settle in as quickly, and I also thought it was a very temporary situation because my sister had depression when I was much younger, maybe around 12 years old, and she must have been like 17 around that time. So at that point we met psychiatrists, we met psychologists, and it eventually ended. That period ended, and there was many years when nothing else happened. So I was under the impression that this is there, okay, we have to deal with it, but it's going to be a temporary phase, it's going to get over soon, right? But once we started reading more about BPD and started understanding more, and we understood that there's a certain longevity to it, it's going to stay for a while, right? It's not a
Hmm.
temporary situation for sure. But in that time, my denial also grew. So by then I was like, we're going to be an exception to this rule. We're going to fix it. And, there's a lot of that. And funnily enough, the whole situation being in that kind of denial helped me sort of look at it from a very different not different, but it was almost like I found humor in situations.
Hmm.
Like if in every psychiatry ward, there's always a security guard who will just make sure it's locked and it's not accessible for everybody. So there were times that the watchman or the security person would assume that I was the patient. He won't let me go get coffee, and I have to like get my sister and be like, "Hey, I know we look alike, but we're not the same person, right?" So we've
Yeah.
had moments like that. We had a little routine when we go out, like even in that moment when we were in the hospital, there were so many other things that we laughed about. So that denial, in a strange way, helped me cope initially, but it was most certainly denial. Like it just grew from there. Yeah.
Hmm. So, Poornima, can you tell us like how to deal with the guilt with grief, like when someone who is your family member diagnosed with mental health disorder?
So the thing is that anytime any family member, or even if it's your friend who's diagnosed with an illness, there's a lot of grief. I mean, like the uncertainty behind it. It's a medical issue. You don't have absolute control over what could happen. It puts us into that mode for sure, and it's a huge component. But with respect to when you're dealing with mental health, like if a family member has a mental health issue, especially something like borderline, bipolar, the environment makes a big difference, right? So
Hmm.
if you're the family member of somebody who is diagnosed, you were also their micro environment. You also contributed in some ways. Definitely not consciously or definitely not, meaning to hurt them, but these things did contribute. So there's a lot of guilt from that aspect. And another kind of guilt that I know most people struggle with, especially siblings, is the whole winner's guilt. The fact that you made it but they didn't. You could have the
Hmm.
similar life experiences, but one of us take to it differently, right? So that is that. So I feel like when dealing with a family member who's diagnosed, guilt and grief come combined when their diagnosis is more towards mental health. So how I dealt with it is, I mean, obviously for a while you're just lost. You're trying to figure it out, but after a point I started zooming out and I started looking at it very objectively, like, okay, this is where I went wrong. These are the Because then you make a lesson out of it. Then you sometimes everything happens in a certain pattern, and once you understand the pattern, you're able to crack the code. It's as
Hmm.
simple as that. It's like playing with a Rubik's cube. Once you know how to do it, you won't always get it right. Maybe not in 5 minutes. It might take 10 minutes later, but you eventually know how to get it right. Right. So
Right. Yeah.
when I'm dealing with that guilt and grief, I always zoom out and see where did I go wrong, because end of the day you will still make mistakes. You will still contribute to situations like this, but you will make newer mistakes. It cannot be the same mistakes again and again, and that really
Yeah.
helped.
So, how do you acknowledge your role to play in it actually? The role of
It's
accepting in dealing with it.
So, acceptance plays a huge role, and it's not about just accepting the illness per se, but while you're accepting the illness, like, okay, I know my sister's ill. She is diagnosed with three disorders, right? And when I have to accept it, I cannot decide, or we cannot decide, uh, to accept only the intensity that we are mentally prepared for.
Hmm.
A manic episode could go really bad, or a suicidal tendency ideation could result in something worse than what you have experienced or what you're capable of handling. So when you accept, you need to accept the whole bandwidth of what all it could come with, because it helps you sort of cope with it even better. And the other thing I feel when it comes to acceptance, what I think I want to throw a lot of light into is that very often when somebody is diagnosed, they're not given, like, for instance, if they're acting out because of their diagnosis, that does not define them as a person. And as a family member, as a friend, or I'm speaking only from a family member's point of view, but I know my sister. I know that her moments where it could be bad is not who she is. She's a rational, thinking, independent person who gives each thing, definite thought. Her ideas are very well informed. So I know that. So I should never let I should be able to differentiate when it's the disorder speaking and when it's not. Right. So, and I think
Hmm.
everybody deserves to do that, and everybody deserves that kind of respect, because very often when somebody is, it could even be anxiety. If somebody knows that somebody has anxiety, if a friend knows, even if they're being anxious for an absolutely valid reason, sometimes it can get very dismissed because of the disorder. So I feel like that is something, when once you accept, you're able to accept more fully, you're able to distinguish. And acceptance plays a huge role. Yeah, I think that's what I feel about it.
So, how to look past being a victim of your circumstances?
So very often, I feel like everybody, for that matter, I'm again speaking only from a, I'm sure there are other siblings who are in the same situation as I may have been. So I feel like very often that there's a whole like victim mentality that comes with it. Like, why is it happening to me, or why is that I'm not given certain things in life? You will not get the same. Your parents have only so much time after work or whatever, and they're not able to divide it. And when you grow older, that, like, very often when they're younger, right, like there's a whole thing of feeling like a victim of your circumstances, blaming a certain situation external for other things not working out, which you do have control over. So that victim mentality grows with time because it's so convenient to blame something, right? And I've noticed that
Hmm.
with a lot of people. So I feel like it shouldn't be there, because as you grow older, your understanding of it should also grow with it, right? And
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think that victim, especially in a situation like this, it works backwards. You don't start off being a victim, but if you believe you're a victim for a while, towards the end you are going to be.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
and also I feel like in a situation like this, although it is very sad and very unfortunate, when you're with it for a while, like I may not have said the same things 5 years ago, but today, or maybe 10 years ago, I wouldn't have said the same thing, but today I feel like it is unfortunate, but it's so much more than sad. It's so much more than unfortunate. I mean, I have experienced feeling absolutely alive and absolutely dead within that hospital, within those periods of time that she was depressed. Or, there's so much more it is than just what we think it is. And we are not going to be able to look past it if we don't look beyond being a victim. So that's how I feel about it. Yeah.
So, did you guys consider family therapy and do you think it's important for family therapy, this situation?
Yes, I mean, we didn't have a choice. We had to go, like, with when you're dealing with a mental illness and you're going to a doctor and all of that. It's a part of the whole procedure where family therapy is a big part of it. I think I absolutely recommend family therapy, because I think it makes such a huge difference. Like, we had such cute moments where, like, I had my dad write a letter to me and apologizing for little things that we might think does not make a difference in the big picture, but it does. So, and very often I feel like, you know we don't acknowledge our own role to play in it. Like, like in the whole scheme of things, right? Yes, my sister is ill, but how does my role change? What are people who are, siblings doing? So there's no growth to that. So I think, like, when it comes to family therapy, I think, there's this Japanese crockery repair method, which is where they fill the cracks with gold, right? And there's so
Hmm.
many broken cracks. So in the end, after family therapy, and after, it's not just family therapy, after that becomes a continuous process where your whole relationship sort of gets redefined because there's so much conversation, there's so much communication, that in the end we're like that. We're broken in so many parts in so many ways, but we're just perfect. Like we're so much more stronger than your ordinary crockery around. So I highly
That's true.
recommend family therapy. Yeah.
That's true. Well, so anything else if you want to talk about or anything else you want to add, then you can just go ahead.
um, how important it is to understand. Okay, so I'll start with this. Okay, I'll tell you what I want to talk about. I want to talk about how, this is something I feel strongly about, that very often when your family member, like, I'm just gonna go straight to my own example. My sister is ill, so my first thing was, okay, I need to know more about this. I need to know who are the real life accounts of people who's had BPD, who's had ADHD, who's had borderline. How does it work together? How do they feel? What is their process? So we get so invested in that we
Mm-hmm.
don't really stop to understand our own role. Like, naturally, it's important to first know about the illness and about what, so that you're more equipped. But it is also very important to know about how how your own role changes, right? I need to know what other siblings are doing, and because it gives me a lot more insight to
Hmm.
know from somebody who's in my shoes doing something differently as compared to just talking to my friends. Because of course your friends can be your support system, but it's also very important to have a support system outside of that,
Correct.
and whatever is comfortable for people. Sometimes there are meetup groups where people meet and talk about it, support groups that are there, but
Hmm.
it's very important. Because I realized there was one time when my sister was ill and we were in the hospital, and I had picked up this book called An Unquiet Mind, and it's about a psychiatrist who, while she was studying to be a psychiatrist, had bipolar disorder. So in that, there is one little part where she writes about how she had this during her mania. There was one time before she recognized it as mania, she wanted to just keep running, and she kept running in this parking lot because she just had that kind of energy and she wanted to like put it there. Although people stared at her, didn't know what she was doing, all of that. So I started reading the book. There was this part in the book, and then I went further later into the book where I read more, and I knew that she turned out okay. She turned out completely fine, and she became a very, very successful psychiatrist. So at the end, so this is all while my sister's in the hospital, and at that point, I remember there was one day when she was like, I don't know why, Yara. She calls me Yara, so she's like, I don't know why I want to run. And she didn't know about this book I was reading, but because I had read that book and because I knew that she turned out okay, the writer turned out okay, I knew my sister would turn out okay too. And I was like, you know what, run. And she ran, and I didn't feel scared. I didn't feel. So that's the kind of support that you can receive from any kind of material, but it's important to find associated material.
Hmm.
Because very often, especially when you're a caregiver of any sort, like my mom, everybody plays a big role, and my sister's done an incredibly like phenomenal job when it comes to it. So I just feel like, we can get so carried away in the process of learning about it and in providing the right information and providing the right support, that we don't really take much care of ourselves. And that's a mistake, because then 10 years could pass or 5 years could pass, and then you look back and then you don't recognize yourself. And that's mostly where that victimness comes, because you feel like you've invested somewhere but you're not invested it in yourself. So it's
Hmm.
very, very important to take care of yourself. And also, like I said, like, find the right support system, not just speak to friends, because as much as they love you, they may not know the right things to say, and that's okay. That's absolutely fair. So that's something I would it helped me, and I would totally suggest that to anyone who's in my place. Yeah.
Wow. Thanks a lot, Purnima. So today, till now, like whatever discussion happened, I'm sure like a lot of people are gonna benefited from this conversation, and it was beautiful talking to you.
It
So
was so nice talking to you.
thanks a lot. Thank you
Thank
for
you so much,
joining us.
Sudeshna.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Bye.